Hello everybody and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast with me, Ian Doyle. Joining me today is our full-time Liverpool correspondent, both home and away. It's Paul Gorst. Hi Paul.
Hello Ian.
How you doing?
Yeah, okay, I think. We'll get into that in a minute, won't we?
We will. And also joining me is our Liverpool writer, Theo Squires. Hello Theo.
Hello Doyle.
Yes, and just in case anybody's not heard, there's been very sad news here at the Echo. We found out yesterday the passing of Dan Kay. You may remember Dan, he was on our podcast for many a time, not just on the Blood Red podcast, but Allez Rouge and Poetry in Motion. He's somebody I worked with for 20 years, and he's very well known around the city for his work certainly with the Hillsborough campaign, Justice for Hillsborough, and people may have seen the documentary on Anne Williams. He helped write her book, and he was involved in that documentary and the series as well. So it's not been a very happy time, and we are hoping to do a special podcast looking at Dan and the job that he's done, and just celebrating his life, and that hopefully will come at a later time. But just before we move on to the podcast, Ghosty, you worked with him for quite a few years as well. Yeah. I mean, obviously it's very shocking, sad news, but the tributes that have been paid to him, you have to look on social media, and we're here in the office, and the people, everybody that's spoken to him, to an absolute person, has said what a great guy was, what a gentle soul, and what an influence he's had on the city.
Yeah, I mean, you only had to go on Twitter last night, and I think R.I.P. Dan was actually trending at one point, wasn't it? Just the kind of outpouring. Just the outpouring of sadness, really, and how well loved he was. Like you mentioned there, though, he had so many kind of strings to his bow, didn't he? That and documentary that he was heavily involved in. He was almost like a sounding board for that, wasn't he? Because he obviously covered it in great detail and was a huge kind of proponent for Hillsborough Justice campaigns, basically prolonging its willingness to fight, wasn't it? And that was an award-winning show that he was massively involved in. He did so much great work on our desk, didn't he? So many long reads, and you're still kind of reading them most weeks when they get repubbed, whether it's about John Aldridge or Craig Johnston or Craig Bellamy. He's written so much. It's just a really, really sad news for all of us, wasn't it? Not just on the sports desk, but across the entire Echo this weekend. I have to say, fair play to the news desk for covering it. The death of a much loved colleague in great detail with such professionalism and integrity, because that would have been difficult for them yesterday. So many people talking about how great he was, whether it's Maria Breslin, the Echo's editor, Joe Rimmer, the head of football, who's our boss, isn't he? So yeah, just a really sad bit of news to hear yesterday. And it was just, when people pass, you see all these things come out, don't you, where people talk about how great they were and whatever else, but I don't think anyone was kind of embellishing anything that they said yesterday about Dan. He was just such a loved fella across the board, did so much for everyone, and it's terrible news, and he'll be sadly missed.
Well, Theo, one thing Dan certainly was, it just seems strange saying was rather than is that he's a massive Liverpool fan, and while obviously a big fan of the city, and he was a champion of Everton in a way as well. He certainly wouldn't have, didn't enjoy seeing them struggling this season, but he was a huge Liverpool fan, and while you didn't work with him quite as long as me and Ghosty did, that you could tell that from just the way that he was, and he was a huge supporter of the club and of everything that the club stood for.
Yeah, like Dan was Liverpool, he was the Echo, he was LFC. He was just a massive patron for this whole city. He's done so much for the club and the city, for us as journalists, for this organisation we work for. And it's a huge loss. It was a loss just when he left Reach a few years ago. And it's good that he could still do the long reads, or we could still repub the long reads, so we could keep him around in some form. I know he still did the occasional podcast with Allez Rouge, but yeah, he's just someone that was a soundboard for everything. Like if you wanted to write something about Hillsborough, I know John Thomas did this a lot, he would go to Dan.
Yeah.
If me, Gorst, whoever wanted to write something that would maybe predate our time as Liverpool fans, you'd go to Dan, because he's got that knowledge. He was that encyclopedia. And while the Everton lads would have Dave Prentice, Dan was that Liverpool equivalent, and he was just so passionate. You wouldn't have seen someone prouder of them when they won the Champions League, when they won the Premier League, and he went to so many games, and even just on shift, you knew how popular he was, because his phone was going constantly, wasn't it? And it was that ringtone, the cricket theme tune, do, and that would go off so many times in shifts, to the extent that if he was on a late shift, he probably wouldn't get home until like 1:30 in the morning. Like, he was there for everyone, whatever your reasoning for being in touch with him. He was so loved, and it's touching to see all these tributes to him.
Yeah, and well, as I said before, we'll hopefully do a podcast looking back at Dan and his life and his achievements a bit later on. But we'll, move on to events at Anfield on Saturday, Paul. And Liverpool just about got the job done against Brentford, 1-0, Mohamed Salah's goal. Just looking at the game overall, do you think Brentford got enough free kicks?
I was just about to say, free kick to Brentford was pretty much the story of the game, wasn't it? I remember I tweeted, actually, this game just feels like it's 90% free kicks at this point, and there was actually a statistic that came out, and I only kind of caught a glimpse of it, but it was something like it's the least the ball's been in play at Anfield this season, just because of their stoppages. And strange game, wasn't it? Brentford certainly playing for the yardages and the percentages and the free kicks, and Klopp said after the game that Brentford are the best team he's ever faced in terms of how they set up their set pieces, and you've seen David Raya taking free kicks from the halfway line, and all 10 outfield players were packing the box, and I think that was a big part of their game plan, just getting free kicks in certain areas that they felt they could try and hurt Liverpool with the physicality of the likes of Tony and, well, right throughout the team really, isn't it? They're all units there, but Liverpool stood up to it quite well, actually. I thought Van Dijk had a very good game. None of the kind of frailties that we've seen perhaps against Nottingham Forest a couple of weeks ago, certainly in the last 20-25 minutes against Tottenham the week before. So yeah, another really decent win. Could have been safer, Darwin Núñez could have stuck one away earlier on. Mo Salah again, we're going to come to him a bit later on, aren't we? But yeah, it's just a sense that Liverpool are really getting it going at the moment. I just wonder whether it's going to come too late in the season. 6 wins in a row, unbeaten in 8 is a really good run of form, and if they go unbeaten now for the rest of the season, that's going to be unbeaten in 11. That's form of champions, isn't it, really? That kind of run. I just wonder whether they have perhaps left it a few weeks too late to put this kind of run together, but as a result of gone for Liverpool this weekend, it's certainly not done yet.
Theo, are you old enough to remember Wimbledon of old when they were? Yeah, I always forget how old everybody else is compared to me these days. But when I was watching football, the Wimbledon were seen as a team that, as Gorst said, played the percentages, played way more long ball than Brentford did. In fact, to be perfectly honest, I saw this comparison and it hadn't even crossed my mind that Brentford were like Wimbledon. I just thought Brentford played the game in which they obviously looked at Liverpool's last few games and certainly the game that they played against Liverpool in January, where they did very well off corners. I think they scored one off a corner, 1 or 2 off a corner. I think it was 2 off a corner, or 1 off a corner, one off a restart, and they had a couple disallowed as well. So you could tell that Liverpool weren't too clever with what happened there. But do you think that's a bit unfair on Brentford, just saying they're a big long ball bumping up into the box and then just hope for the best? Because I thought tactically they played pretty well against Liverpool.
Yeah, it's what they've been doing all season long. They aren't just set pieces. They've got pace. They're really good on the counter-attack. And I think they're a bit more technical than you give them credit for. Like, Ivan Toney, he's come on leaps and bounds, hasn't he? Since you just initially saw him as a Premier League striker, he'll get you like 10, 15 goals. He's a target man, but now he's shown that bit more to his game. Like the back heel he did for, was it in Wemo?
Yeah.
He played him down the left. That was superb, and he did so many of those smart touches. Like, yes, they are a threat at set pieces. They've got a lot of tall players. They've got a lot of physical players, and they will score goals from it. And it has been a problem for Liverpool at times this season. I think Klopp said, was it after the Forest game, that we obviously didn't do enough preparation on the throws. Well, for this one, they clearly did do the preparation because they dealt with it for the majority. I know Alisson had to make a couple of big saves, but there weren't as many heart-in-mouth moments there. So that was a step in the right direction from Liverpool. But when you're still having to have their pace on the counter-attack from Brentford, when they are pressing you hard, because they won the ball, every second ball, it seemed like Brentford were winning it and just going on the attack again. And the fact that, was it Thomas Frank came out and said, well, Van Dijk got booked, Fabinho got booked, Konate got booked, Alisson's time wasting.
That time was ridiculous. It wasn't even time wasted at all.
28 seconds, wasn't it? I think
it.
Andrew Beasley's just actually tweeted it's less
ridiculous.
Than the average for most of the wastage of times. But yeah, Liverpool really had to grind it out, dig deep. Yeah, they might have had to concede a few fouls along the way, probably more than Klopp would have liked them to. No,
Probably more than they probably deserved as well. I think the referee was a little bit lenient towards, or fell a little bit for some of Brentford's tricks. That's part of the game, as far as I'm concerned. And it's up to the referee to kind of pick up on it, and he just didn't.
Describing Brentford as physical is not really not trying to do them as a disservice.
It's a compliment in a way.
I'm not particularly too much of a snob in terms of the best way to win a football match, but I do think that probably as physical as you can be for a Premier League team in this day and age, if you like. You mentioned Wimbledon there. Probably a little bit of an unfair comparison in terms of that.
I would like to point out it wasn't me that made that comparison.
Yeah,
I was surprised when I read it.
Yeah, it's a bit unfair because of how different the football was in those days. But along those lines of really strong physical outfit, and they can play, but of course they can. But probably about as physical as it's possible for a team to be in the Premier League and not. Just sink like a stone.
And they did have some good results. They drew at Arsenal, I think February or March time. I think maybe in January now. Thinking about it, but they won at Man City just before the World Cup.
Best.
Well, exactly, yeah. So it again underlines that there's no such thing as an easy game in the Premier League, and for Liverpool to get 6 wins in a row at such a key part of the season, a lot of that has been down to the return to form of one player in particular. That's Mohamed Salah. It seems every single time he goes out onto the pitch, he's set to break a record, and he did it again on Saturday. What was it, 100th Anfield goal, the first Liverpool player to score in 9 consecutive home games, only the third Liverpool player to score in 8 consecutive home league games after Roger Hunt and Fernando Torres, and he's moved up to 186 goals for Liverpool, which is level with Steven Gerrard, who is in fifth place overall. So
and he's brought up 30 for the
exactly,
season.
Yeah. See, I even forgot one.
4 times in 6 seasons. What more can you say about him? Klopp got asked about him again after the game, didn't he? And he obviously waxed lyrical, but I think he touched upon something when he said he perhaps doesn't get it. He's not as appreciated as he should be, and it's only going to be when he's left. And you're talking about him in 10, 15 years that you look back and think, wow, what a player that this fella was. He's going to go down as one of the all-time greats alongside anyone you care to mention. Your Dalglish's, your Rushes, your Fowlers, whoever. He's going to be right up there. Your Gerrards, and he's going to deserve to be. I think he's got all the personal numbers to go with it, and he's got the trophy haul as well, hasn't he? And he's only 30, and I think in this day and age, the way elite players can play for even longer than normal. You kind of used to look at retirement age 32, 33. I think now it's probably closer to 35, 36, and the way he looks after himself as well means that he's going to be playing for quite some time. And it's weird now to look back, isn't it, when you think early in the season when he was supposedly struggling and there was some question marks over the decision to give him that blockbuster contract. They've all been made to look foolish.
And compare it to some of those names there, you say an Owen or a Fowler or a Torres, they really only showed their best for 3-4 seasons at Liverpool. Like, obviously all 3 had injuries, because that stat that Salah's played 97% of Premier League and Champions League games, and he's just done it for so consistently now for like 6 seasons in a row. Another one is he's hit 19 goals in the Premier League. Yeah, again, I know that's a weird number, but it seems to be the benchmark because that was Michael Owen's career best. Yeah. Like, he's going to get 20, isn't he, before the season's out? He's got 2 years left on his contract. Whether he gets an extension or not beyond that, we'll see. I suppose he has to still be delivering these goals and these assists, but he could be aiming for that 250 goal mark for Liverpool before he's done easily. Maybe the top 2 is beyond him, but he should be coming in behind Rush and Roger Hunt if he's still returning these goals at this electric rate until the end of his Reds career.
Van Dijk said exactly the same thing after the game. He stopped in the mix zone and he said that maybe he's only going to get the respect that he merits at the end of his career. And he didn't say that's not just Salah. He said that's probably just for every single footballer, just the way things are at the moment. Yeah. Because we know from social media, if one person has a good game for 2 weeks and suddenly they're the best thing ever, and someone has a bad game, it's like sell him. I mean, that's never really been any difference, but it just seems to be a bit more emphasised or brought to light because people just use social media all the time these days. But for Salah, what I think has also been interesting is that he's now playing in a completely different Liverpool front line to the one that he joined. And of course, it was Firmino and it was Mane, and that was it for like 3, maybe 4 years. And Diaz came in last year, Jota came in the year before. Diaz perhaps just kind of got into that team and then got injured straight away. Núñez has come in as well. Now there's Gakpo as well. And if Liverpool were going to start next season with those, I think with those 4, is it 5 or 4? I can't remember.
5.
It's 5. It's 5 of them, 5 because Firmino's going. So with those 5 frontline forwards, Salah is the first one still on the team sheet. And then you're looking at, certainly on form at the moment, Gakpo down the middle and Diaz on the left. But the point is that Núñez and Jota, they can both do jobs in those two positions, the left and the centre, but no one's looking at like nudging Salah out the team, are they?
No, I think, you look back at the kind of forwards who Salah's been with at Liverpool. There's always been a clearly defined front three, hasn't it? Salah on the right, Firmino down the middle, Mane off the left. And then you've had the likes of a kind of injury-prone Daniel Sturridge, Dominic Solanke, Shaqiri, Minamino, Origi. All these players who have always been happy to be the backups and the deputies, and there's always been that drop-off, haven't there? And that's always been a big kind of criticism of Liverpool, that they haven't had the depth. Now I'm looking at it and you're thinking, aside from Salah on that right, you can play your horses for courses approach next season, whether that's Gakpo through the middle, Núñez off the left, Jota down the middle, Diaz off the left. And there's so many options, and I don't think there is a clearly defined front three now. I think every player has just got to kind of do the business in training and give Klopp something to think about on a game-to-game basis, and I think that ultimately will only help Liverpool going forward. And then you've got maybe the likes of Ben Doak who can play in the odd cup game, or we've seen Harvey Elliott can still play on the right, can't he? So I think Liverpool's forward options, even though they are losing Firmino and it doesn't appear to be like they're going to be bringing anyone in, I think
They don't really need to, though, do they?
yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting time, and I think looking at that Manchester United game, that was a kind of look into the future, wasn't it? Where Núñez, Gakpo, and Salah all scored 2 each, and Firmino wasn't even Diaz wasn't even involved. So I think going forward, that's something that can help Liverpool with the benefits of a full pre-season, and then it could all look to really take off next season.
You didn't even mention Carvalho either there.
Well, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That
And
shows
you've
you.
still got Kay Gordon, if you can shake off this pelvic injury.
Well, he hasn't played for...
It'll be
play all
interesting
season,
next year, because say they finish 5th, Europa League, you'd imagine Salah's not playing those games. It's going to be...
He'd want to, though.
He'd want to, but you'd imagine that's when you really see Harvey Elliott on the right, where he goes for one of the younger players. But you've still got the threat of AFCON. That's looming next January. So it's going to be another few weeks where Salah's not playing.
Don't ruin it for us, Theo. Can we just get the season out of the way first?
You just said that it's not a clear front three, and I'm backing it up. It's just as well. They need it to not be like... I know Klopp keeps saying...
And they're losing to be fair, they're losing Ox as well, who, to be fair to him, he has done an okay job when he's had to come in the right. He did it last season, and he scored against Brentford away. He didn't have many performances this season, but that was one. Somebody else who celebrated a landmark against Brentford, who also got up to 100, and that was Alisson Becker with 100 clean sheets as a Liverpool player. I think it was in 200-something games, 236 or something like that. I think there's only 4 or 5 goalkeepers who've kept more clean sheets for Liverpool. Next one on the list is David James, 102, so you'd like to think he's going to go above that. Could even possibly do that this season. But he's been Liverpool's player of the season, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. He's been so consistent. There's a Klopp joking with him saying he probably made 100 life-saving saves this season. Alisson replied, probably more. He has made a couple of mistakes this year, but you compare that to the mistakes, say, David De Gea is making, and there's so much scrutiny on De Gea, whereas Alisson, he's still Liverpool's best player this season by far. He is the reason that they are within that Champions League contention.
Best goalkeeper in the Premier League?
Best goalkeeper in Europe?
Best goalkeeper in the world?
Yeah, probably. I'd go that far.
Gorsty?
I'd have to have a think about that, but I can't think of anyone off the top of my head who's been...
There's been quite a big shout for... I've forgotten his name. The AC Milan goalkeeper. His first name is Mike Maignan, is it?
No, right, yeah.
Yeah, him. There's been a big shout for him. Saves penalties.
Yeah,
saved one against Salah. Saved one from... Not Giroud, he scored one. Who did he save one from? The Napoli guy with a very long name.
Kvaratskhelia.
Yeah, saved one at the Champions League. He's one. I mean, there's obviously always Courtois, Edison. But after that, all black at Atletico Madrid.
You still just think it's Alisson.
Well, exactly. That's the whole point. I mean, these goalkeepers are good goalkeepers. Some of them are actually great goalkeepers, but Alisson's probably better than all of them. And it's very rare for Liverpool to have players, even when they were winning stuff, to be like the best in the world in their position. And Van Dijk's been that in the past. Salah for a spell. You have to argue probably the best player in the world.
Guardiola had his little moan, didn't he? It's like, why aren't Liverpool doing better when they've got the best goalkeeper in the world, the best right back, the best left back, the best centre back, and the best forwards?
Well, we know why. You should listen to our podcast. You know, come on, Pep. You've not got anything else to do. You certainly you might have a free weekend. It's in June if things don't go so well against Real Madrid. But going back to Alisson. The complication of that, of course, is that Liverpool's other goalkeepers don't really get a look in. Adrian's not played this season, has he?
Community
At all?
Shield.
Oh, Community Shield, sorry, yeah. He played in the Community Shield. And Kelleher's only played twice or 3 times?
He played against City in the Cup, didn't he?
Derby.
Played against Derby and the FA Cup against Wolves, so that's 3 games.
4? Did he...
He didn't play in the other one,
He
did he?
didn't play in the other one, no. So, basically, they're the only 3 games he's played since he scored what turned out to be the winning penalty in the League Cup, which is, 15 months ago now? 14, 15 months ago. So there's been some stories certainly of late, of interest from other clubs. Liverpool haven't heard anything directly yet, but you would think that he could be somebody who other teams will want to sign. Liverpool haven't got a price tag on him yet, but we just, you're looking at it 20-25 million, I think, which for a reserve goalkeeper is quite a lot. But this is a reserve goalkeeper who's won competitions for Liverpool, played in Wembley finals, he's plays for the Republic of Ireland, and he's somebody who, in probably almost every other Premier League team, there's probably maybe 2 or 3 that he would just walk straight into it, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he would. So compare it to his compatriot, was it Gavin Bazanu? I'm probably not pronounced that right, but the one who went to Southampton and City, I think that was like 15 million. Yeah, he's played
that
more.
much, was it?
I think it was around that. He's played more football, but it's been in the lower leagues. Obviously, never played in the Premier League for City. I think he was first choice for Ireland because he's had that more game time. But Kelleher has certainly delivered at that higher level. He's played in the Champions League, and if it wasn't for the fact that Liverpool have the best goalkeeper in the world, Kelleher would be first choice for Liverpool. It's only because Alisson is at that age. It's like, yeah, you probably need to go and play elsewhere. Like if Alisson was in his mid-30s now, you'd say, yeah, we're going to be making this change now. You don't want to be in a situation like United were in last year with De Gea and Henderson when they had that nasty spat. Henderson basically said, yeah, let me go. And now they've got him on loan. It's like, well, what is he going to do with De Gea's contract expiring? Henderson's obviously a bit annoyed that they didn't play him more, that they turned to De Gea. It's going to be very difficult to replace him if he does move on. But he's another one of these players that has never had a bad word to say about not playing every week for Liverpool. He's been a really valued member of that squad. He's won trophies, and you want him to go and be first choice elsewhere. You think it's Tottenham were being linked with him, Brighton, Brentford.
Yeah.
These are some big names as well. I think Aston Villa maybe, when there were rumours of Martinez not seeing eye to eye with Emery. I think like Celtic have been linked with him. Some big teams here, and it does seem like there's going to be a bit of a goalkeeper merry-go-round this summer. You think David De Gea, like I said, is out of contract. Hugo Lloris might be out of contract. Chelsea have got question marks over their goalkeepers. David Raya at Brentford, I think he's only got a year left on his contract, and they're resigned to him moving on.
You're trying to get him a move to Liverpool, aren't you?
Nah, it costs too much to be Liverpool's number 2. But yeah, there's so many goalkeepers that could be on the move. It will be interesting to see who ends up where and where that leaves Kelleher.
Just funny then, just before you talk about Alisson, you said then about Kelleher's not had a bad word to say about the setup and despite he's not been playing. Arthur Melo came out this week, and he said something basically similar, how much he's enjoyed training with Liverpool and working with Jurgen Klopp. And this is a player who's played 13 minutes for the first team and had a couple of appearances for in Premier League too, and he's had that one game in the Papa John's Trophy at Rochdale, which I was at, and he got subbed for Jay Spearing, which was one of the most surreal of a very strange season. That was right up there with one of the most surreal moments.
Yeah, I don't know what Klopp does it actually. I suppose it's testament to one of his strings to his bow as a manager, but when players are on the periphery and they're not getting the game time that much, they never seem to talk out of line or speak badly about him. And I always remember, I think was it possibly Kevin Prince Boateng when he was at Dortmund for a bit, where he was saying players who hadn't played for months just couldn't wait to get into training because they thought, I'm going to show the manager this week what I can do, and they'd be loving life at the training ground and the atmosphere around it all, and then the following week they were in the team or the squad, and then they come to train again with that same, but none of them seem to get disappointed at the fact that they weren't playing.
That's a little bit like any workplace where if it's a good atmosphere and a good environment, if you're perhaps not as involved as perhaps you should be, or doing the kind of thing that you want to do, if you can still turn up and really enjoy being around other people. And I thought, and especially with football, is that at Liverpool at the moment, you're still training with, as Pep would say, you're playing all the time, the best goalkeeper in the world, best left back in the world, whoever. So there is that. So even if you're not getting in the team, it's not like it's a massive slight on you. And Arthur was quite straightforward what he said. He says, I was responding to a problem that they had, which they now, situations change where that problem is completely different, so that's why I'm not playing. And of course he missed 6 months through being injured. But as you said, so he's possibly the ultimate example of, if he's saying that, and this is somebody who came in, isn't officially a Liverpool player, is coming on loan, he's not played, he probably knows he's never going to play, and yet he speaks so highly of he has. There's no reason for him to say it just for saying it's sake.
No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, as I say, that's testament to how Klopp works. I guess that every player feels like they're included, and they're only a couple of decent training sessions away from forcing their way back into the plans. Just hasn't worked for him, has it? Not really his fault. That is down more to the problems across the summer at Liverpool. But just going back to Kelleher, just one of the things I wanted to mention is I kind of liken that to a Nico Williams situation where, you know, he was never going to break into the team long term, but Liverpool can point to the fact that he was a Wales international who played 25, 30 times for one of the best Liverpool teams in modern memory, and they could demand the fee as a result of all that. And I think it will apply to Kelleher, really. You know, like you mentioned, Doyle, the Wembley appearances, the fact that he was a Carabao Cup hero. He's never made a glaring mistake as far as I can remember when watching him.
He's very good. First game against Villa, that's 5-0.
Yeah,
that was very early on when he was a kid.
He's very good with the ball at his feet as well, which is another reason why Liverpool were quite happy to promote him. And obviously, as a goalkeeper, he's sound as well. So
I had a chance to speak to him a couple of times this season, and he's very laid back, very kind of almost like he just wouldn't think he was an elite level footballer, just kind of how laid back he is about everything. But one of the things he said after the City game in the Carabao Cup was he'd essentially might assess his options this summer, and I think if he did, don't think anyone would have a bad word to say. Whether if they give him a pat on the back and out he'd go with the best wishes of everyone, given that what he's done for Liverpool over the last 18 months.
If it wasn't for Alisson, he'd probably be playing. Almost any other goalkeeper Liverpool had, then he'd probably play more often. Just moving away from players leaving to possibly a member of the backroom staff joining, and that is, and I'm going to try and pronounce this, Jorg Schmadtke, are we saying? It's funny because when that name came out, Telegraph did the story, we checked it out, and he's like, he's somebody who's certainly in the frame for the job of sporting director. I didn't recognise the name, but then as soon as I saw the picture, I was like, I know who you are. You know, I'd seen him around, not around like, he's been with the office, in St. Helens, I'd seen him in the Costa, on the retail park. I recognised him from, and then looking at his history, he's obviously done well. What's quite interesting is that he's done well working at clubs that have had quite a tight budget. I know Liverpool have anything like, you know where this is going, and then like a tight budget, say somebody like Wolfsburg or Cologne, I think he was at. Hanover. And it wasn't Hamburg. I saw that he had talked with Hamburg, but he didn't take over there. But Liverpool have more money, but they do have the restraints that perhaps say Manchester City and Newcastle and Chelsea, and to a lesser extent, well, possibly that'll be different by the time that the summer comes around. Manchester United, but it seemed to be greeted with a bit of indifference from some supporters. But then it's like, who knew who Michael Edwards was before he became an analyst at Liverpool, and then he got promoted. It's the whole thing going back to the whole social media thing now. Everybody's always been interested in everything, but the fact that there's this like vacuum to fill there, people who in the back room who you never really heard of have taken on these personalities without, how many times did Michael Edwards talk to the press? Never.
Once. He did the open letter, didn't he? With the
I think he still wasn't talking to us, though, was he? You know what I mean? You see him around, but he'd never, ever speak to us. So you never got a chance to get to know him. And
saw him dance on a stage.
In the same... Oh, that's right. Yeah, I saw him dance in front of a stage.
Oh,
did you see him dance from the stage?
Yeah.
That was in Paris. But he'd already announced he was going by then. And he even said, he's informally said like I'm having a holiday. So, he never really... You never got to know the person. But people just make these judgments straight away on half the time, just what they look like.
Yeah, I think it speaks more to the rising profile of the sporting director role, really.
Which, of course, in England, it's been a thing in Europe and other parts of the world for years and years and years and years. But in England, the last 10, 15 years, it's only become prominent. And I think Kamoli was the first one for Liverpool, wasn't he?
Yeah. I think you can look at. I mean, it's difficult to judge a sporting director because you can look at managers and you immediately look at what they've won, or if they're at, a kind of lower profile club, how they steadied the ship or built them up or whatever else. And you can look at players and you can look at their stats and what they've achieved and whatever. But with sporting directors, it's a lot, there are more variables. How do you judge a sporting director? No one really knows what the role is. I think fans boil it down to what players do they bring to the club. And essentially that's the kind of agricultural way of looking at it. But it's essentially what fans will want to see, won't he? So this George Schmacker, I'm not too familiar on the players that he's brought in to whatever clubs, but Liverpool will have done the homework. If they're in talks with him, they will know that he is someone who can be quite a tough negotiator and someone who's going to be proactive and aggressive in the pursuit of players and get what they need to do over the line. And it's also worth mentioning that it's not going to be for this summer, is it?
No.
Liverpool's work now is very much still under the Julian Ward banner, who's going to be leaving the club in the summer. So it'll very much be a soft launch into the role, should he come in June, and then he's going to be looking at what perhaps could be done in January and beyond. So he's got time to get his feet under the table and, you know, get to know everyone and how it all works. But everything I've read about him seems like a bit of an interesting character who doesn't really take too many prisoners.
Soft launch, there's a phrase I bet you never ever thought you'd ever say when you're at journalism school. Oh, I want to write about football, let's talk about soft launches. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if we hear more from him, because obviously the Germans are a bit more outspoken, aren't they?
Well, the thing is, that's a very interesting point, because basically going back to what I was just saying then, yeah, you're right, because they're so used to it that they're more prominent. To be fair, was Ralph Rangnick, he was never really the sporting director at United, was he? Or was he, and he took over the manager?
No, he was meant to be. Yeah. He was meant to kind of shuffle upstairs once a season as manager to come to an end, but it went that badly they just decided to get rid of him.
Sorry, Theo, you were saying?
Yeah, it's always a silly one to judge them as well, because you think it was a team picking the players. It's not as though the sporting director's just gone, I want this, this and this, not spoken to his manager, not spoken to the scouts or anything. Yet they're the ones who are judged by it, but they are the ones who claim the success or the failures. Like, Comolli lost his job because of Jordan Henderson. That's what was being said at the time, but now he's claiming Henderson as one of his successes. You could have Roy Hodgson saying, I wanted Luis Suarez, he would have been one of mine. We've seen how many times Brendan Rodgers come and say, that was a transfer committee signing, I didn't want Thiago Ilori, for example. I wanted X, Y and Z. Like, they're all squabbling for the ownership, whereas when they had this new model, it's still a pretty similar model, they just got a new name for it, so it wasn't that bad cloud of the transfer committee anymore. It was still more unified, wasn't it, with Klopp, where like this is working together, Ward, Edwards, but it's still a difficult one to judge. Like, how do you say who's a good sporting director if you're a fan on transfers? Like, you want someone who has unearthed Lionel Messi, taken him from someone who's an absolute unknown and sold them for 200 million. That is like the idea of the perfect sporting director, and it just doesn't exist. Like, this myth of Michael Edwards came about because of the Coutinho deal, because Barcelona were daft enough to give Liverpool 140.
Myth of Michael Edwards? Myth?
Well, that's where it came from 140 million. It's like, how often does that
is it a myth, though?
Maybe not. Is it a legend? A legend of Michael Edwards?
A myth suggests it's not real.
So it is a legend then.
I mean, he was very good at his job, wasn't he? And I think, we've got to hold our hands up in this situation and say we played into that more than probably anyone across the course of his tenure.
Well, again, that goes back to putting his name in a headline. It suddenly everybody wanted to read it because he did gain that kind of reputation that's never really been seen before.
Because he was very low profile as well, wasn't he? Not much was known about him, and I remember being at wasn't necessarily him, but being at an event with Josh Williams and pointed that there's Michael Edwards there. He recognised Michael Edwards and said, that's Julian Ward next to him, and he was like, is that Julian Ward? And at the time, he was going to be Liverpool's new sporting director, and these people aren't instantly recognisable, are they?
I saw Michael Edwards in St Helens, by the way. So there you go. There's a little bit of a factoid there for you. Right. If you ever wanted to see Paul Gorst wearing a hard hat, you should have got yourself to Anfield before the game on Saturday.
Where's YMCA tribute to
I don't know. You sing a good Oasis, so I'd like to think you'd be able to hold a tune. Can you only do the one song? Can you do the one song?
Maybe,
some might say that's the only one you can
do.
Three or four,
yeah, limited range.
That would be a very good pod, and please write in and then request it, because we do that one as well.
Maybe we'll do that if we get in the top. If we get in the top four, you can do that.
See me in Woodies.
Anyway, yes, you were given a little bit of a tour around the nearly developed, fully developed, I should say, Anfield Road end. I mean, anybody who goes to Anfield have seen in the last couple of months, it's certainly shot up and it's getting towards near completion. But what's the latest? When are they expecting it to be done, and what's going to be happening next?
Yeah, so it remains, according to Liverpool, on budget, within budget, and on course for the start of the season. But Liverpool have actually asked the Premier League to play their first game of the season away, just to give them an extra 7 or 8 days or so, just from an operational standpoint, to make sure that any kinks are ironed out. You've got a test event in the offing. They're not too sure how it's going to manifest, but it doesn't look like they're going to be having a pre-season friendly there at least. But yeah, it's absolutely shot up, hasn't it? I remember there was about 5 weeks in between home games between United and Arsenal. And I remember walking past Anfield for the Arsenal game thinking they've made a lot of progress on that during the last month. And speaking to people at the club on Saturday, they were saying last season when Liverpool played 30 home games, it was problematic trying to find time to fit in progress because Liverpool were playing a lot of games. Essentially played 30 home games in a 63 game season. This season's been a little bit easier, especially with the international breaks and the World Cup. They've been able to make progress on that a lot easier, and yeah, it's all on course. It's going to create around about 500 jobs, obviously an extra 7,000 seats, take Anfield up to 61,000, the most that's ever been in the Premier League era. So yeah, it's all on course, and I'm sure it's going to be fantastic when it finally opens.
Yeah, Theo, you went to it last week, didn't you? Because we were unable to read an email properly. Yes. You turned up, and it was actually only this Saturday. Just one before we talk about the final thing. Just one yes or no, because we can't not talk about this. But all I want is yes or no for these questions. Were you surprised by the reaction to the national anthem being played at Anfield on Saturday? Yes or no?
No.
Do you think Liverpool were put in a pretty impossible situation by the Premier League and pressure from the government?
Yeah.
Yes.
Shall we never mention this ever again?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll finish then.
I have to say, that was the loudest noise of disapproval I've ever heard at Anfield.
Are you sure? I thought Anthony Taylor managed to match it with his performance.
Just about,
We'll finish then with been some interesting results in the Premier League over the last couple of days. Not just Everton winning 5-1 at Brighton, which I think I've always been convinced they're going to stay up, and now I'm absolutely convinced. I know that you two don't quite. I need to get this out there because I'll either be looking stupid or I'll very smug towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean you've been staunchly behind Everton's chances all season. I must admit I'm not quite as convinced as you. Maybe a little bit more after yesterday. Came from nowhere, that didn't it?
But what it has done, of course, is that it's kind of not Brighton out of the top four conversation, but it has made it very difficult for them now because they would literally have to win all of their games, and then the teams above them, which I think Tottenham, Liverpool, United, and Manchester United, that is, and Newcastle would have to drop points. But Liverpool are now only 1 point behind the top four. They've got 3 games remaining. Newcastle on 65, they've got 4 left. United on 63, have got 4 left, and then Liverpool on 62. Last season, I think Tottenham managed to overhaul a 4-point gap over 3 games against Arsenal, or one of them they had actually played Arsenal and beat them. The year before, Liverpool were 3 points off with the same amount of games going and ended up finishing third after Chelsea and Leicester both lost 2 of their last 3 games. Is it possible that Liverpool might do it again?
Yeah. I see no
reason. Are you sure?
No reason why.
I mean, but which team then is going to falter? Because you look at United, they've got 4 games against teams that aren't really playing for anything, and 3 of them are home. And the one thing about United is that they're absolutely terrible away from home, but at home they're very good. Yeah,
the home thing is something Liverpool could do without, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, I know Bournemouth aren't bad at home, are they? They certainly improved. They gave Chelsea a game on Saturday, beat Liverpool, of course.
Got beat 4-0 by West Ham.
Yeah, there is that.
John Solanke would do us a favour.
I'm looking at Newcastle.
They still need to drop.
Newcastle's still going to play Brighton and Chelsea. I know. Okay, you can say, well, Chelsea being awful, but
they've got Leeds and Leicester
any given day. Chelsea can.
The 2 games that Newcastle got are Leeds away and Leicester at home. Was it the way round?
Allardyce's first home game against his former club, who sacked him prematurely, so we want to get one over them. And if Leeds are going to stay up, they need to win that. They need to get the points on the board.
He'd have long memories. That was 16 years ago, wasn't it?
He's a very bitter man, isn't he, Sam?
An elephant never forgets.
He still rants about Rafa every so often, doesn't he?
Yeah, I suppose you're right. How old is he now? Probably about 68, isn't he? He's quite old, getting on now, isn't he? Old Sam. Anyway, going back to the point, the top 4. So you genuinely think there's a chance?
Well,
I mean, how would you rate the probability, the possible out of 100%?
Results this week have made me firmly believe again. I think I said to you last week, didn't I, Theo? It's just a shame that it's looking like it's done. But with United losing at Brighton and then losing at West Ham, it's massively opened the door again, hasn't it, for Liverpool? So they don't need a lot. They just need United to stumble in one of those games, because I firmly believe Liverpool are in a bit of rhythm now where they can go on and finish the season with 9 points from 9.
I still think it's maybe slightly too much. We need that next slip up, and then you can have the confidence to it. Because say United slip up against Bournemouth, away horrible form continues, and they win the 3 home games, that still gets them it by 1 point, doesn't it? Like, if they finish level, Liverpool have the edge on head-to-head, they have the edge on goal difference, same against Newcastle, % on the head-to-head, and goal difference is easy enough there to make back, but you needed a couple of slip-ups there. Like Liverpool, whether they create nerves, like Newcastle have still won 8 of the last 10. You look when they lose to Aston Villa, think, oh, maybe there's a chance, and then they just go and put in that amazing performance against Tottenham. Like losing to Arsenal, that's nothing you can really use as a proper drop-off of them. They still look strong, but they've got the tougher fixtures. It's like when that's relegation for time of the season and teams are fighting for the points, basically going to get another shock result. Like no one saw Everton doing Liverpool a favour and battering Brighton so emphatically, apart from you.
Well, I didn't think they'd win 5-1, but I wasn't surprised they got something from the game.
I also think, though, the last game of the season, there's something to say for that when the pressure's on. Liverpool have handle left.
Do you think that's interesting?
I don't think Newcastle know what that feels like.
That's an interesting one, because I think if Liverpool can take it to the last game, then it becomes unbelievably interesting. So they'd need United to not win one of the games, and they'd probably need Newcastle to not win 2. Well, they would need Newcastle to not win 2 of them to have a chance going into that. So Liverpool take it to the last day, they got a great chance. You didn't answer my question, by the way. Out of 100%, what percentage probability do you think Liverpool have at the moment of getting through? As in your view, not the actual probability, because I can't be bothered doing the maths.
30.
No, 30?
Yeah, I'd say it's still favoured against them.
Yeah, I was going with 25. I'm surprised. I thought you might say more from what you were saying.
I will point out FA Cup final as well.
No, I
FA Cup finals.
I just don't think
that's the week after. We'll be bothered about that.
Distracted for Leicester, didn't it, a couple of years ago?
Chelsea
were distracted by Champions League final.
Hang on, because Chelsea, that was literally their 3rd Champions League final ever, and Leicester had never won the FA Cup. You know, United have won more FA Cups than I think anyone apart from Arsenal, is it? Or something like that.
They're a struggling team. They haven't won many trophies in 6 years.
They won the League Cup.
I know, it's the first
literally won the last
6 years.
trophy you could possibly win, so they can't be struggling that much. Right, I think that should do us. Paul, how can we get to you on Twitter? What's your...
At PT Gorst.
Theo?
At Theo Squires Echo.
And I'm at Ian Doyle Sport. Thank you for joining us. And you can also catch the podcast. And what does normally get said at the end of this? I've normally stopped listening by this point.
Spotify.
Wherever you get your podcast, and also on our YouTube channel, which you can check out all the previous podcasts. And we will see you soon. Cheerio.